What it do? Yo man, listen. Today I have an incredible Lord of Contagion build for 40k Crusade. Let's get right into it. Now, this video I'm gonna be focusing on the Lord of Contagion in the new Death Guard Codex. He did get a significant glow up in regards to his abilities and what he provides for your army. So, if you look at his stats, he has 5 movement, toughness 7, 2 up base save, a 4 up invulnerable save, at 6 wounds, leadership 6, objective control 1. As far as durability goes, this is as good as it gets baseline for characters. This is incredible. This is Custodes level durability, which is appreciated for Death Guard because we are very slow. For the melee weapon, we have the Man Reaper, which has 2 profiles. The strike profile, which you want to be using against bigger targets, at 5 attacks, hitting on 2s, strength 9, AP 2, and damage 3. It's pretty good. Anti-Terminator, we take those. For Death Guard, it's important to remember strength 9 and strength 6 are more like strength 10 and strength 7 because of the army rule, which reduces enemy toughness by 1. Both weapons have lethal hits, which is pretty cool. It comes up more for the sweep profile, which is 10 attacks, hitting at 2s, strength 6, AP 1, and damage 1. This is very much the anti-horde clear option. He has the deep strike and the leader rules. For this video specifically, I will not be covering the leader rules, however, I will read them. We care mostly about his second rule. So, his leader rule, the vector of disease, while this model is leading a unit, melee weapons equipped by the models in that unit have sustained hits 1 and lance abilities. Sustained hits means when you roll a 6, you get an additional dice, which is pretty cool. Lance means +1 to wound. If you've charged, it's an incredible offensive upgrade. Unholy Resistance is his second ability. Those of you who played 9th edition Crusade will be very familiar with this concept. The first time a model with this ability is destroyed in a battle round, roll a d6 at the end of the phase. On a 2+, set that model back up on the battlefield as close as possible to where it was destroyed and not within engagement range of any enemy units with 3 wounds remaining. Each model can only be set up this way only once per battle. This is essentially the 2-up revive relic from 9th edition Crusade. On this guy, he just has it outright, no strings attached. This means your opponent, as long as you don't roll a 1, is gonna need at least 2 phases to deal with him. There is one relic which brings the whole build together. It is an enhancement called the Rejuvenating Swarm from the Flyblown Host Detachment. The Flyblown Host Detachment was the Grotmas detachment. It is still valid, unlike the Index detachment, which got invalidated when the Codex released. Now, the Rejuvenating Swarm, it's only 10 points, which is dirt cheap for what it enables. It reads Death Guard Infantry model only, which the Lord of Contagion is a Death Guard Infantry, so it's fine. At the end of each phase, the bearer regains all of its lost wounds. This is the Chaos Spawn rule that they had for a while, which really messes up damage calculations, and it is extremely strong. Now, before I talk about the build, I want to explain a little concept called wound value, which is the notion that not every wound is the same, which does make a lot of sense. Think of it this way. If you're shooting your bolter at something like a Tau, Fireside Warrior, you're probably gonna get a wound roll, you're probably gonna hit, you're probably gonna get a wound, they're probably gonna fail, and you're gonna kill a Tau. That's pretty cool. But if you shoot that same bolter at an Imperial Knight who has higher toughness, an invulnerable save, and a feel no pain, that damage is less likely to chip away a wound, which makes a situation where defensive stats increase the value of any given wound A wound's value doesn't depend on itself, but rather how many defensive layers the model who has the wound has. This makes a lot more sense when I explain the build. Now, as for defensive layers, a Lord of Contagion, as I stated previously, has 6 wounds with a 2-up base save and a 4-up invulnerable save, and he has a base toughness of 7. Additionally, when he dies, he comes back on a 2-up. Rejuvenating Swarm is extremely important because all it requires from your model is for it to have 1 wound remaining, and then it will always go up to 6 wounds. And because of sequencing, at the end of the phase, if you die, you come back on a 2-up, and then Rejuvenating Swarm triggers, so you go back up to 6 wounds. So, as long as you don't roll a 1, it's going to take 2 full rounds to deal with this guy, which is pretty good, considering he's extremely durable. Now, this durability can be increased in Crusade specifically. As I stated in the previous video, Chaos Boons, the Boons of Nurgle rather, are essential pseudo-battle traits that you can take instead of taking battle traits. However, you do have to gamble to get what you want. Here, for this character, on the first D3 you roll, you want to roll a 2. So you have a 33% chance of this happening. And the second D3 you roll, you want to roll either a 1 or a 2. You are aiming to get grossly swollen, which is add 2 to this model's wound characteristic, and the 5-up feel no pain. You might be wondering, Draupnir, why do I even care for the 5-up feel no pain? There are other ways to get it, both from inside the Death Guard Codex and from the Tyrannic War Crusade book rules. I'll explain that really fast. But first, I want to go over the stats again, right? Because when you have 2 extra wounds, you go up to 8 wounds. And you have a 2-up base save, a 4-up invulnerable save, and a 5-up feel no pain. Your layers are already increasing. A 5-up feel no pain essentially means like you have 10 or 11 wounds, because that's how the math works. Like you reduce 1/3 of the damage coming to you, which is pretty cool. And if you're lucky with your invulnerable save, like this is already really strong. Remember, at the end of the phase, you just need to have 1 wound. So the more wounds you have, the better your chance of this happening. And there is one Crusade book specifically which will help with this, and that is the Pariah Nexus Crusade expansion. Now, Pariah Nexus, I love it. I think it's a great book. What I'm going to focus on is the extremely good Crusade relics that are present in this book. Now, there are 3 main things we want from this Crusade book. The first one is called Armor of the Soulless Sentry, which improves the toughness and save characteristic of the bearer by 1. Unfortunately, we will not be able to benefit from the save characteristic increase, because the save characteristic, unlike 9th edition, cannot be increased past 2+. So you can't have a 1-up save, unfortunately. But +1 toughness is pretty good. Then we're going to try to aim for the Noctic Shield. Add 1 to the toughness and wounds characteristic of the bearer. Once per battle, when an attack targets the bearer's unit in your Crusade army is in the defensive strategic footing, which is a whole thing for the Crusade book, which you don't have to worry too much about it, but it does help. The bearer can activate the Crusade relic. If it does, until the end of the phase, each time an attack is allocated to a model in the bearer's unit, subtract 1 from the damage characteristic of that attack, which is an absolute and massive increase in durability. You will most likely not die the turn you activate this, unless some ludicrous things are coming into you. I'm talking a harpoon from the Big Knight. I am talking I mean, the harpoon will not kill you outright, but in Crusade, the harpoon will have 2 shots, which will definitely kill you. Well, you never know. You can roll in wall saves, and they might roll poorly. But like, this is really good. And then you'll get Heroic Constitution, add 1 to the wounds characteristic of 1 character model in this unit. Now, personally, I will never take Heroic Constitution on any other build. I don't think it's, I just think it's trash compared to other options we have. However, as I've stated before, all you need to go back to full health is 1 wound. And we are just trying to layer as many defensive buffs and as many wound buffs as possible to get the most out of our character. So all of this combined, you're going to have a Lord of Contagion who has 10 wounds with a 2-up base save, a 4-up invulnerable save, and a 5-up feel no pain, as well as toughness 9. It's important to remember that in one of the detachments, if he is attached to a character, a unit, you can get extra toughness, but it doesn't work because it uses the unit's toughness, which is not going to be affected. Like, it's going to become 9, it's not going to get 11. So, like, that's a mistake you can make, don't make that. So, toughness 9, you're almost as tough as a rhino. I get a rhino is toughness 10, but you have almost as much as wounds, you have a 2-up base save, and you have a 4-up invulnerable save and a 5-up feel no pain. Additionally, if your opponent somehow gets through all your defenses and kills you, which is totally doable, you can come back up on a 2+, and then heal back to 10 wounds again, as if nothing happened. Rejuvenating Swarm carries this build to a point where your character becomes an absolute nightmare to remove. In Crusade, you can have 6 slots of Crusade relics or battle traits. We went 5 defensive upgrades. We do need to have a little bit of offense, or else our character is going to fall flat. And the best thing we can add is a weapon enhancement for +1 damage and +1 armor penetration. The reason I say this is because this really helps a lot with your damage output and your breakpoints. What do I mean by this? It becomes way more evident in your sweep profile. Remember, your sweep profile is 10 attacks, hitting at 2s, strength 6, AP 1, damage 1. When you weapon enhance it, it's going to become 10 attacks, hitting on 2s, strength 6, AP 2, damage 2. Strength 6 is an incredible breakpoint because this sweep profile, which is usually bad at killing Space Marines, becomes tailor-made to kill Space Marines. Because remember, Space Marines have toughness 4 base, and in the Death Guard aura, they go down to toughness 3. So you're going to be hitting on 2s, wounding on 2s, with AP 2, damage 2, which is tailor-made to kill Space Marines. Additionally, your Man Reaper Strike attack will become AP 3, damage 4, which is designed to kill Custodes and Terminators. You can even take chunks out of bigger vehicles who often don't have good saves and they have to rely on their invulnerable saves. This upgrade makes your character actually scary into a lot of things. Now, I imply that this guy is like unstoppable, unkillable, whatever. But how good is he really? I want to be extremely clear. He is by no means invincible. He will most likely survive 90% of what your opponent throws at him. And if he happens to die as your opponent focuses him with his entire army, he will probably come back thanks to his passive ability on his datasheet and then heal back to wound. But the selling point of this guy is that he's only 110 points. Despite the fact that he's only 110 points, your opponent has to dedicate significantly more than 110 points at this guy to take him down. And they have to do this 2 times to permanently get rid of him. Those are resources that are being pointed at this guy and not at the rest of your army. And Death Guard, you are slow, you really appreciate the time this guy gives you to move up the board and run at your opponent. And your opponent can't really ignore him because he can just kill whatever he wants and not really have to worry about retaliation. He's not going to steal objectives by himself because he's only objective control 1, but he is killy enough where you can just put him on an objective and he just in 1 or 2 turns can probably take out what your opponent puts there. One important thing to note is in Crusade, your whole army can get critical 5s as well as exploding criticals, which means if you roll a 5 or a 6, your dice both get copied and they don't need to roll a wound roll. So this guy becomes an absolute menace. There are definitely things which can take him out. I'm not going to deny that. If your opponent has a Knight Valiant who has a harpoon which does like crazy devastating wounds, that is a 500 plus point model dedicating its shooting to kill a 110 or 120 point model with the enhancement. And then he comes back up. So this thing is absolute insanity. You guys need to play it to really feel how good this is. Anyways, that's my video. Thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate doing so. Have a good day and stay safe. Bye.